Hi everyone, if you're watching this, hello, hello. Hi guys, just had to change my headset, the microphone wasn't working, so do apologise for the delay. Just going to give it another couple of minutes just to make sure everyone gets in. I realise we're starting this a couple of minutes late, just testing everything. Also, don't forget you can head over to onlinemastery.co.uk/live where you can take part in a discussion. Also, if you are on the Google Hangout, drop me a question over. I'll make sure I answer that for you. And welcome to the people who are online. It's good to see some viewers out there. Okay, another 30 seconds and we'll get started. Okay, hello, welcome to Website Wednesday, episode 2. And today I'm going to be talking about domain names and hosting. So just to recap on last week when we were talking about the cornerstones of building a successful website and things to consider when you build a website, we're going to take that a step forward now and we're going to look at the things that you need to build a website. So today we're going to focus on domain names and hosting, and then next week we'll look at websites themselves. So again, this is going to be a progression. I appreciate for a lot of people that are watching this, if you're a little bit more advanced or a bit more au fait and understand a lot of the technical stuff, I'm sorry if this is a bit basic and entry level for you, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to sort of work together to get to the same level playing field before we get into the more in-depth and advanced stuff. We've been doing some amazing stuff this week with some split testing, some analytical software that we've been testing out, and there's some amazing tools out there which I'm dying to tell and share with you, but I don't want to jump ahead too fast. And anyone that knows me will tell you that I have a tendency to get carried away. So I'm really trying to make sure that this covers everybody. And again, it's just going to be 30 minutes. I'm just going to go through. You're not going to have to look at me so much tonight. I'm going to share my screen with you. I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview, just quickly. And when I spoke last week, I mentioned briefly, I'm just going to recap again, that there are many different ways to build a website. There's many different services that you can use and many different people that are giving you opportunities to use their platform. They entice you with things like free domain names, free hosting. There's a brilliant website builder you can use. Just as an example, there's Wix, there's Moonfruit, there's Vistaprint, there's WordPress.com. There's so many different opportunities out there for you to build a website using all of these different platforms. And not even WordPress when we talk about content management systems. There's also Drupal, there's Joomla, there's so many. There's so many different types, and that's not even looking at the custom built things. So it can be a bit overwhelming. And one of the biggest things I hear from people is we don't know where to start. So I'm just going to tell you what I feel is best from my experience, That's not necessarily what's right for you, but in the 15 years I've been building websites, I've gone through several different changes, and I've learned that the system I'm using now is just, it's the best system for me. It gets the sites out the quickest, the most professionally, with the best SEO, the best performance, the best security overall. So it's not focused on any one particular area, but it's more of an overall picture that gives you the best to get out there quickly, to get out there cost effectively, and to make sure you can scale. I took on a new client tonight, and I was talking to him just a little while ago, and I said, you know, we're not building your website as to what you want now. The company you have now is great, but let's look at where you're going to be in 6 to 12 months time, and let's build your website now for then, so that when you get to that point where you're doing the things we were talking about, you won't have to then rebuild your website. It'll already be there. We can just add in the additional functionality. So it's really about not just knowing where you are now, but knowing where you're going. Knowing where you're going. Yeah, I like that. And it's all about the journey and making sure it is a stressless, or at least as stressless as possible. So you don't want to be worrying about, is my hosting working? Is my domain name's not working? Oh, my website's down. Oh, I've got to update content, and oh, I can't get hold of, you know, I can't access. You don't need that trouble, you know. And so many people, they get this sense of self-worth that, oh, I fixed my website, I've done this, and I've, you know, it's. There's a big debate at the moment in the news about iPhones and Apple, and I've seen a lot of haters talking about Apple and, you know, oh, iPhone 6 is out, and here all the idiots are out again. But I'm someone that used to be on Android, and I'm somebody who's gone across all the different platforms, and I moved to Apple, and I love my iPhone, I love my iMac, I love my Mac Air, I love my iPad. I should have shares in Apple. Now, this isn't for an ego thing. I mean, yes, it used to be, and I'm going to get the new iPhone at some point just to show off, as many other people are. Differences, I admit it. But the thing is, it just works. It's not overcomplicating things. Yes, there are limitations into what you can do on an iPhone as compared to an Android, but the great thing about that is it means you just get shit done. You don't get caught up in the whole process of tinkering and playing. And that's the same with websites. People get so caught up in the tinkering and the playing with, oh, I should do this and I should do that. They forget to actually get the website out there and to test it and see what works. So to go back to what I was talking about, we're going to start at the beginning with domain names. Then we're going to look at hosting. We're going to do that today. And then next week, we're going to look at actually starting to set up and build websites themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see my screen. Okay. So now you're looking at my screen, and what I'm going to go through here when we start is domain names. And there's lots of things to consider about domain names. The one that I want to focus on to start with is when you consider a domain name, how it could be unintentionally inappropriate. And there was a great website called borepanda.com that I found, and it just goes through 30 of the most unfortunate domain names. So when you're first looking for a domain name, you need to consider the following things. One, can you get the domain name that's relevant to your business? If you already have a company, then it makes sense to get the domain name for that company. If you can't get that, then to get something similar. Sometimes it's worth getting a regional domain name, as in carpetcleanerinlondon.com or carpetcleanerinsoutheast.co.uk. Sometimes it's worth doing that if you want to target that area. But ultimately, if you're looking to scale, you want to stay away from regional domain names. You don't really want to be going for something where when you, in time, and I'm just going to minimize this for a moment, when you get to the point where you start to scale your business, you really don't want to be confined in one area. You want to have, ideally, you want carpetcleaners.com, and then you can have /southeast/London, and you can have london.carpetcleaners. .com. So you can have what's called subdomains, and there's other ways to do it. You don't necessarily want your top level domain to be restrictive. That should ideally be your umbrella, and then everything else you can build underneath that. So it's always best to try and get the domain name that is relevant to your company. Now recently there's been a big change in the whole top level domain, and what I mean by top level domain is www.yourdomainname.com. That's a top level domain. Now there are so many new domain names are available. We've got the .co.uk for the UK, the .com that we're aware of, we know these. There's also .org. So .org will be for an organization normally associated with charities. There is .net and .biz. These are normally associated with scams, marketing businesses, MLM companies, network marketing opportunities, and the normal sales hype that you see in a typical .biz or .net page. They tend to be avoided. There is .gov and .edu, so edu being an educational domain name and .gov being a government domain name. And then there's lots of other opportunities as well. So for example, there's .it for Italian or Italy. And one of the things that people have started doing, for example, is setting up a website called brand.it or build.it. So when you look at it, it's build it. So there's a nice little play that you can use on some things. And there's a lot of companies out there that are doing this. You'll see them if you look at their domain name dot. There'll be 2 letters relevant to the country, but that makes up the rest of the word. And this is a great way to get those top level domains, but it's not necessary. .London's just come out. There's now so many opportunities. You can have .academy, .coach, .expert, .ninja, which I love, by the way. So .tv, there's so many of them. .luxury, which I think is something like £150 a domain name, and they vary in cost. But the whole idea is to try and, if you can, always try and get the .com. It makes commercial sense to have a .com as a business, a .org as a charity, and you want to try and, if you can, get the relevant country to what you're in. So if you're in the UK, .uk or .co.uk. .uk has just come out as an extension. So I would say it's always best to try and get as many as your budget lets you. But go for the .com first, then if you're in the UK, .co.uk, if not the .uk, if not then go for something else or a different name. Things to consider when you get in a domain name. Don't use underscores. This is a really simple thing that I see people doing. Some people use, and I'm going to use carpet cleaners again because I seem to be on that topic, but some people have carpet hyphen cleaners or carpet underscore cleaners. The challenge when you're using an underscore is if you're looking at a URL or if you're looking at a link and it's in blue and it's underlined, as normally sort of links are, if you're using an underscore for that, then you're not going to know that that is an underscore. You're not going to be able to tell. It would just look like a space. So it can confuse people. So try to make sure that when you choose a domain name, you're not choosing one that has any special characters, any underscores. Try to avoid dashes. Also, try to avoid going to something like carpetcleanersuk.uk because putting UK twice or uk.co.uk just looks a bit, there's better ways to do things. So that would be my advice there. Now I'm going to go back and share my desktop with you again so that you can see. Okay, bear with me a sec while I just open this up. Okay. So what I was talking about before is having inappropriate domain names, and I'm just going to go through a few of these to give you an idea, because when you purchase a domain name, one of the things to consider is not just if it's relevant to your company, but also how it sounds. How it sounds when you say your domain name to somebody. How it writes down. So if you was to write your domain name down, how does it look? How easy is it to remember? So if you have to tell someone your domain name, how easy is it for them to remember that? And just a few examples here. The first one is IT Scrap. So IT Scrap is obviously an IT company that deal with Scrap IT. I'm not saying it's crap, but it just is an example to show you how things look when they're written down. Who represents? So this is a database of talent representatives. And who represents, obviously, once it's written into a URL, could be misrepresented, as you can see from the example here. Penn Island, one of my favorites, Penn Island. We all like Penn Island to go, and if you need to buy a pen, this is a great place to go, is to go to Penn Island. Don't get that one confused. Now, experts exchange, so exchanging your expertise. I'm assuming this company probably gets a lot of traffic from unwanted source. As you can imagine, that it can be misconstrued. The last one I go through here is speed of art. Again, you get the idea here that it's really important when you have a domain name to how it's written down and how it's said. You know, therapist is always another one. Can be written down, it can be seen differently. So always consider when you're buying a domain name how it sounds, how it reads. Don't worry too much about it from an SEO perspective these days. It doesn't matter as much as it used to. It's more important that when you send, okay, so you'll have a domain name for two reasons. One, for search engines, two, for people. Consider that when you have your domain name, you can set your email addresses to that. So if you have a domain name of It's Crap and then you're all of a sudden sending people to info@itscrap.com, it looks a bit, do you see what I'm saying? You see why it's important to start considering this. So your email address will be quite simply whatever your domain name is, and put an @ in front of it, and then whatever you want in front of that. And that's just something else to consider. So now we've had a look a bit about the domain names, and also if you want to go in depth and you want to go really in depth on this, the first chapter of my book, or the second chapter of my book, is all about domain names, and it talks to you in depth about considering all the things you need to know, and that's available on the website if you want to have a look at that. What I would say is that when you're ready to purchase a domain name, there are several registrars out there that you can use. Now, one of the most popular that everybody knows is GoDaddy, and I'm just going to show you GoDaddy, but I'm also going to give you two other opportunities to compare. So there's a company called Namescheap, which is a good one. There's so many others. Gandy is another great one. I'm going to show you mine because obviously we do domains as well, and I want to give you, as well as the opportunity to look at different companies, I want to let you know that obviously we can help and we can do that as well. So with domain names, there's two things that I would consider. One is going to be the price of the domain name, and two is going to be what they offer with that domain name. To be honest, a registrar, it doesn't really matter who you use for this. It's not the same as hosting. When you use a host, it's slightly different. I would say if you're going to purchase a domain name, it would make sense to purchase that domain name with whoever you're going to be hosting with, because then they can propagate and set it up a lot quicker. If you were to choose GoDaddy, and I'm just going to do this as a test account as an example, and we'll go for .com. Very simple, search for your domain name. Once you've done it, it'll tell you if it's available. Fantastic it is, we can select that. We can then purchase. It also gives us the opportunity, if we want to choose other domain names, .org, .net, .com, .uk. So different opportunities for different domain names we can add on here. Once we have our domain name, we'll simply click continue to cart. It will take us to where we need to go. And this is where it's going to change slightly. So what you thought of before was a good investment because the domain name was quite cheap. It's now telling you that you need to add on some certain elements. So if you want to protect your domain name and give it some additional privacy, the reason that you'd maybe want to do this, because, and this is only available on .com and certain extensions, you can't do this on a .co.uk, for example. But when you purchase a domain name, you have to put in your name and your address. That is legal requirement for purchasing a domain name. As soon as you do that, your domain name is then visible to the world. And I'm going to show you right now. I'm I'm going to choose a domain name. We're going to go to a website called Whois. Now there's lots of different ones, but we're going to use this one, and we're actually going to go to, let me think, who can we use? Let's use google.com. So we're going to go, and I've got a feeling this is probably a mistake because it's going to be protected. But we can see here that google.com has all of this information. Now, as you can see, update prohibited means that the privacy is in force. But you can get a lot of information here from a domain name. So you can tell a lot of things. We can see who the admin name is, also gives us a telephone number, and it gives us their address. So we can see that this is registered in Mountain View in California. Also tells us a name service that the domain name's pointing to, so we can see what hosting they're using effectively in a lot of cases. And it just gives us a lot of information. Now, if you're registering a domain name with your home address, people then have access to your home address. So just be aware of that. If you're registering it to a company, not so bad. But one thing you may want to consider is to have the privacy option. It just means that all of that information is then protected and no one can see it. Now, as you can see, it's £5.11 to add that on with GoDaddy. If you were to go for somebody like Namescheap, for example, the privacy is included in the price. So we go to thisisaTestaccount.com, same thing, exactly the same. We're not going to take hosting at this time. We're not going to add email or anything. I just want to go to continue to cart. Again, we're going to do the same thing here. So we can see we have a free year. Well, I say a free year, it's 11 pence to add that on. But we can see through GoDaddy, don't actually know where it is, it's taken us somewhere else. We can see that for 1 year for a .com with GoDaddy, it's going to cost us £13.16. So £13.16 to have that with the privacy. We can see it's going to cost us £6.74 for the same domain name with Namescheap. So everyone who goes to GoDaddy, because of their amazing marketing, you've now realized that you can get exactly the same domain at half the price, just simply by going to Namescheap. And the great thing about this is also not just the domain name, but the additions. Namescheap do fantastic SSL certificates. So if you need additional security, they do really, really cheap certificates, which will get your site protected, and it's worth having that. I'd always recommend having that, and it's just a good option to have. I am a reseller. I'm registered as a Namescheap seller of domain names, just to give you an idea. You can also search for them with myself, and I'm just going to do the same thing. We'll check the availability, and you can see it's available. Now for myself, I charge £15. The reason I charge £15 is because we have a lot of additional features. We set up the mailboxes, we set up all of the DNS, everything that is done, we do that ourselves. We also set up, you get access to our SSL certificate. So there's lots of additional features that you get in our domain name, which is why it costs what it costs. If you went through Namescheap because you're concerned about budget, then I would say this is going to be one of your cheapest options. Once you purchase your domain name, that's the first thing we was talking about, you then need to consider your hosting. Now, if you're going to go with GoDaddy, you may want to do this because you can then get your hosting through them. It makes sense to have them in the same place. You don't really want to be purchasing your domain name through Namescheap, and then let's say you take hosting through myself, you've got two different control panels. You've got my control panel for your hosting, and you've got Namescheap for your domain name. Things can get a little bit confusing. So you don't really want to be doing that. You want to try and, if you can, keep it in the same place. What I would suggest is that if you do have it in two separate places, then you look at what is called the name server. So when you purchase a domain name, once this has been purchased, it will point to a name server. Typically, if you purchase it through Namescheap, it will point to their name server. If you purchase it through GoDaddy, it will point to their name server, and you'll get a GoDaddy holding page. And you've probably seen these before. What you would then need to do, whoever you set your host up with, is you would need to point the name server from Namecheap across to whoever it is you're hosting with. And I'm just going to sign in so that you can see this. Just to show you how this works, I'm going to give you a real example of this. So I'm just going to use one domain name that I have here. As I said, I only use this for a few of my accounts, but I'm going to use this here where I'm going to click on a domain name. And what I'm going to do is, it says here domain name server setup. So I can click here on the left hand side where it says once you've purchased your domain name, I can click on domain name server setup. What we can do here, if we're using Namecheap, this will be what it will be as standard. If we're going to specify our own custom DNS, you will need to know who you're hosting with, what their name server is, or what their DNS is. It's called a dynamic name server or a domain name server, depending on who you speak to. Now, with your DNS, it needs to point to your hosting company. You will get this information from them. My DNS for my server is ns.mainnameserver.com for this domain, and ns2.mainnameserver.com. So we simply put this in, save changes. What will happen now is when if we were to visit this website, minecampus.org, instead of this going to the holding page for Namecheap, this will now be redirected to my server where we will have this set up, or to any other server if it's going to GoDaddy or to whoever else. Now, one thing that I want to say about hosting is it's very important to consider your host. Sites like GoDaddy and sites like HostGator, and there are a variety of different hosting platforms out there. I would say be careful. One thing I would say is go to Google and type in EIG hosting. EIG stands for Endurance International Group. Now, I'm not throwing mud at anybody, and this is purely my opinion. This is what I believe to be true, but it's not me necessarily saying that one is better than the other. But Endurance International Group, which was formerly known as Bizland, is one of the largest website hosting companies in the world. And as we can see here, they've got a big budget, and they went with deep pockets a while ago, and they bought all of these companies. HostGator is on here, as we can see. Bluehost is on here, as we can see. And there's a lot of other companies that are on here. And the reason that I mention this company is because, and again, this is only an opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just my belief, is that this company were more interested in their bottom line and stripping out support and increasing profitability. As a result, your support may not be what it used to be before this company bought them out, and also the service. If you go in, type in problems with HostGator into Google, you will start to see lots and lots of people with problems. There's forums, there's so many different places with people. And I manage, I'm an admin of several groups, part of a WordPress group, part of quite a few Facebook groups where we help people with issues with their websites. One of the biggest groups that I'm part of on Facebook is one called Internet Marketing Super Friends. Phenomenal guy called Mike Hill runs it. It's full of the most amazing internet marketers. And there was a point where it was continuous bombardment of, my hosting platform's rubbish, and this is rubbish, and that's rubbish, and my hosting this, and my hosting that. The challenge is, if you go onto Facebook and type in, what hosting platform shall I use? All you are going to get is bombarded with people telling you who they use. And no one's actually going to give you a needs analysis of why you should use them. And let me just tell you, regarding hosting platforms, there are different types. You have, and we're going to start at a basic level. You have what's called cloud hosting. Okay, now cloud hosting is, there is a server And all a server is, by the way, is a big computer, a specialist computer, which, if you type in server into Google and you sort of have a look, you can get an idea just from this image. This is what a typical data center might look like, where it's just full of these high-tech computers, and on here are massive hard drives, massive processors, and they run your websites. And there are data centers all over the world. So what will technically happen, this is obviously me, by the way. If I'm working on your website, this is how I look. What will technically happen is when you go for one of these cheaper options, maybe the $1 a month option or something like that, what they're doing is they're telling you to basically come onto their platform because they're going to look after you and they're going to do it for $1 a month. Now, the challenge you have with doing that is, yes, it's only going to be $1 a month, but at what cost? And the reason I say that is because you are going onto a shared server. And the best way that I can explain this is if anybody goes into a city in rush hour and you imagine a train and you ram as many people as you possibly can into that train, okay? It's not an ideal environment. And this is where, if you get everybody in that train, now it may cost £1,000, and I'm just pulling this number, it may cost £1,000 to get this train from A to B, okay? Let's just say it costs £1,000 to get this train from A to B. Now, if you've got 1,000 people in that train and they're paying £1 each, yeah, it's going to be a cheap travel, but at what cost? You're going to be breathing in people's bad breath, you're going to be getting ill when people are coughing on you, you're going to be sweaty, it's going to be not a nice experience, you're going to be crowded, it's going to be heavy, the train may not go as fast as it may even break down. There's just a lot of things that could happen. Whereas if you were the only person on a train paying £1,000, you've got a bit of luxury. You've got your armchair, you've got your flat screen TV, there's just other things. And I know I'm exaggerating this, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of hosting. When you go onto a cloud server, a shared hosting environment, they ram as many websites as they can onto a server to the point of bursting. And what happens is, another great analogy, if you imagine a house being a server and your window in that house is like a website. Okay, the bigger the house, the more windows it's got, i.e. the bigger the server, the more websites it's got. When you have a lot of websites, i.e. windows, and they're open to the world, it's easier for a mosquito to fly in. Okay, and if a mosquito flies in, as you know, it can be a bugger. Same thing, if you're on a server and a lot of websites are on there, more chance of a virus or a Trojan getting in and infecting the server. Your website could go down, not because of anything you've done, but because somebody else hasn't protected their website. You could pay all this money to have someone protect your website, and it could be the best website out there and it could be protected, but if the server's not good, it doesn't matter how good your website is, if the server's not good, your website's going down. So you need to make sure you've got a strong server. And I'm telling you now, when you use a site like GoDaddy or HostGator, you're going on their $1 plan or their managed WordPress plan, yeah, it may be convenient, but you'll find out the hard way. And I'm just trying to help you now to not have to go through that trouble. What I would suggest is you find somebody who is a little bit more caring of you, as opposed to, and I'm not saying lacking in experience, I'm saying someone who's more caring from a support role that's there to help you. Because when your website's working, it's fine, you don't want to know. You need to know when your website goes down, you can get on the phone, you want to know that you can get onto support and they're going to be there. Bang, straight away. Yes, your site's down, we're fixing it, it's being done. You don't want someone twiddling their thumbs saying, just going to connect you to a call center 24,000 miles away and they're going to read off a script and tell you what you should do to try and get your website back up. These things happen, and I just don't want you to have to experience that. So I would say avoid cloud hosting as best you can. I use cloud hosting. When I say avoid it as best you can, I use it because there is a place for it. Whilst I'm telling you the pitfalls, there's also a lot of good things about it. For a business that's challenging in financial terms, it's a way to get started. It's a way to get out there. So it does work. What I'm saying is just be careful who you use. Don't go onto a platform that is going to ram as many websites on it as possible. When I do my shared servers, when I use my clouds, I limit it to 100 sites. So 100 websites, and there are some requirements for those clients. They have to have certain things on their website to ensure that they're protected. So consider that. The next option from cloud and the cheaper options is going up to what is called a VPS, or a virtual private server. Now, whilst this will give you some more stability, because you'll have your own independent space, you'll be sharing things like the processors, the CPU, and you'll be sharing the RAM, so you'll be sharing the other resources. The challenge here again is that if somebody has a massive influx of traffic and all of a sudden the server spikes and crashes, your site will still go down. So although you're more protected from being in an isolated environment, you're still sharing the server resources. Now, I just touched on it briefly there, and this is something that happened to me a long time ago, and it's happened to clients as well. I got one of my websites mentioned on a very well-known radio station, and it's amazing what happens when 30,000, 40,000 people try to access your website at once. If you're on a host and paying a couple of dollars a month, I'd pretty much guarantee that your website's going to crash or slow down, or both. And the challenge with that is you've just got this exposure. Let's just say you've had a celebrity tweet you, or you've just had your website mentioned on the radio, or you've just got an amazing bit of publicity, and everyone comes pounding to your website to have a look at your product, and your website doesn't work. What a missed opportunity. That's the time when you need your website up. That's when you're going to get all your customers. Payday comes and you're not there to collect the check. So you need to make sure that you have things in place to protect you. So that's why I would say a VPS is better than cloud hosting. The challenge with VPS is normally it's not managed. You are responsible yourself. And unless you know what you're doing, I would not recommend. I would never set up my own servers again. I would never put myself through it. It's been an amazing journey. It's been an educational one, but I would never go through it again. So my best business advice I can give you is do not get caught up in running your own servers. Okay, it's just not worth it. The next stage up from a VPS is a hybrid. Now, hybrids are what I run. I run hybrid servers, and that is where you have independent RAM, independent hard drives, but you share the processors with other hybrids. Now, I have 18 processors running on my server, on my stack, and it works really well. What I would say is that a hybrid is, whilst for me personally, you're looking at about £25 a month to start, so you can see it's not as cost effective as a cloud. When you go to the final step, or the next step, which is a dedicated server, which is just your own box, for a dedicated server on a well-known site like Rackspace, you're probably looking at about £350 a month, and that's when you need to start being, knowing that you're secure. So cloud hosting is a way to get started. If you've got a simple WordPress site, then yes, absolutely, get onto cloud hosting. It's a good way to start. If you need to run custom scripts, like you've got CRM systems, or you've got databases and accounts, and you've got specialist things that you need, you will need a VPS for that. A lot of shared hosts won't let you run custom scripts. You won't have root access. So if there's certain things you need to do to customize your user's experience, or the programs and applications that you're using, you may need a VPS or a hybrid to do that. The good thing is, if you're with a good host, you can scale up. You can start small and then click a button and you can build up. What I would say with regard to hosting is Site5 are phenomenal. Rackspace is still phenomenal. Liquid Web is phenomenal. WP Engine is phenomenal, although they are purely for WordPress. And I'm gonna say it because I wouldn't be in the business if I didn't believe it. Come and speak to me. We run our own servers. We've got data centers in the UK. We're certified partners with Cloudflare, which is a CDN, content delivery network, and that's something else I'm going to touch on quickly. If you've got your server, say for example, like me, my data center is in the UK, and I've got clients all over the world. Let's say I've got a client in America. They don't want to have to go from America all the way across to my data center in the UK to pick up their site to be served all the way back to America, because that is lag time. It's going to take time to do that. It's only seconds, but again, it's lag time. So what I have is what's called a content delivery network, which is data centers all around the world. So what happens is, rather than going from America to London and then back, it just goes from America to the data center in America and then back. Just cuts that time out. So we use CDN networks for many reasons. To prevent attacks, something you may have heard called a DDoS attack, or a denial of service attack, so or distributed denial of service attack. We protect against things like that with the partnership we have. But there's lots of other reasons. It helps increase the performance, and it's just good practice to have that. So yes, if you're going for hosting, I urge you to get managed hosting. So have a company that will look after your hosting for you. You do not want to be going in and mucking about and playing with the root and with all the core control panel. You want someone that can do that for you. All you want to be able to do is log in and know your site's going to work. Make sure that you can access your root, ideally, which you can't on most sheds. The reason for that is because as you scale and get bigger, you'll start to need to do things. WordPress ships with, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's like 32 megabytes as a default setting. If you want to increase that, you need to increase a file called your php.ini file. You can only access that file at root level. And if you're on shared hosting, I'm telling you, GoDaddy will not let you near that. You would need to come with someone like me that can say, okay, yeah, look, we'll amend that for you. So it's just worth noting and being aware of that so that you know. So we've gone through domain names, we've gone through hosting. If you're going to go for a package, I would say, obviously I'm going to say come and speak to me, and we'll buy your domain name and we'll set up your hosting and we'll put your website out there for you. But if you want a bit of option, Namescheap, we spoke about them. And then if you're going to go for a hosting platform, there's a lot out there to use. I've told you the ones to avoid if I were you. That's just a personal preference. But Liquid Web is more of a dedicated, Rackspace is more of a dedicated. If you want a managed hosting environment and you want a good one, the best I can advise is either myself or WP Engine. And the guys over at Site 5, it's well worth talking to them. Another company that you may want to consider is a company called Heart Internet in the UK. They're fantastic, have amazing support, and will be able to help you for a local level. If you're going on to more dedicated hybrids, then they don't offer a service that will manage that for you. It's something you'd have to do. And as a supplier of hosting, I tell you now, the biggest challenge in the market at the moment is good people to manage your server. There are so many people out there that will do it, but you start trusting somebody in a country that is charging you $20 a month to manage your server. Expect some upset customers. If you're gonna pay $20 a month for your support on your server, then you better be paying $200 a month on your support for your customer service. Because I tell you what, you're gonna suffer. So just be careful. Make sure that when you go through your hosting, make sure you're using the right channels. Please, if you've got any questions, get in touch. If you've got any questions now, I'm going to hang around for a few minutes and I'll answer them. I appreciate we've gone over tonight. I wanted to get this content out to you. Any questions and I'll answer them now. If not, then please join us next Wednesday, same time, where we will start to go through websites and we'll start looking at getting the structure in place to actually build a website and get the framework off the ground. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate your time, and I'm going to go over and have a look for some Q&A. Let me just check out the website itself. You're welcome. Just looking at the questions now. Steve, you're welcome, mate. Yes. Good question. How easy is it to change your host? So if you're with a host, how easy is it to change to another host? Great question. It depends on who you're moving to. If you're moving to a good host, normally they can go in, pick up your site and move it. What I would say is if you're going to move, typically there are 3 things that you will need to consider. and this is something that a lot of people maybe don't realize. There are your FTP files, or your files in your website itself. That's one thing you need to consider. There is your databases, so if you have any databases, and we'll touch on this in other episodes, but for example with WordPress it uses files and databases. So to move a WordPress site you would need to move both. So if you have your files and your database, the third thing you need is your emails. Okay, I've seen this time and time again where people move to a new host, or they change their name server, and if they haven't backed up their emails, their database, and their website, the emails go down and it's a nightmare. So I really urge you that if you are going to move, to make sure that you have a backup of your database, your files, and your emails, and make sure that whoever moves you over does so without any downtime. You know, too many times now I've seen a website go down and then not come up for a day. If you're going to move, make sure that it's set up first. So if someone's going to set your site up, get them to clone your site and ask them to show you it first. You can always set it up on a temporary domain or a temporary URL before the site moves, so that when you move it, it works. A great question though. Yeah, absolutely, to make sure that when you move it, the hosting company should take care of that for you. If someone moves to me, then I'll typically take care, and I'll do it without charge if it's a simple move. If it's a simple pick up a WordPress site, move it with some email addresses, our team take care of that. If it's a more complex and there's a lot of stuff involved, then obviously there may be costs involved, and it's really on a case-by-case basis. Okay, any other questions? I appreciate there may have been a bit of waffle tonight, and it may have gone in a little bit over some people's heads. To other people, it may have been a bit boring, but as I said, I want to cover these basics so that we can get this nailed, so that we can move on to the really cool, get into the grit of it. So, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Take care.